I think what's happening, I see this online and in the memes and kind of in the meme culture around you. I think what's happening essentially is that the hero's myth resonates so strongly with young men. It's kind of it's a basic narrative. You descend into the underworld. You go where you least want to look.
Yeah.
Because
you rescue your father.
Yeah, yeah. Because in filth it will be found.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And so
that which you most need is to be found where you least want to look.
Yeah, it's a King Arthur theme.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It's the whole theme of the Holy Grail. That's exactly right. Well, so there's a little story that goes along with that. So King Arthur and his knights are all sitting around a round table, which implies that they're of equal stature, essentially. And they go off to look for the Holy Grail, which is the container of that which redeems. It's something like that. But of course, who the hell knows where to look for the Holy Grail? Yeah. So each of the knights decides to enter the forest at the point that looks darkest to him. Right, and that's a hell of a story, because first of all, it shows that courage is the first requirement, right? Yeah. Because you look for what's darkest and you go in there. That's part of, Jung developed that idea quite substantially with regards to his notion of the shadow. And I think it's also what makes this believable for people, because, the alternative is something like, well, look for happiness. And everyone thinks, well, I'd rather be happy than miserable, and like, fair enough, but there's nothing about that has any nobility. And it's not believable. No one believes that, because everyone knows that life is bounded by tragedy and that malevolence abounds. Everyone knows that. Yeah. So, and you say, so there's that terrible dark dyad of tragedy and evil, and you wave the little flag of happiness in front of it. It's like, no one believes that will work. Yeah. But then when you tell people, look, you're dark, you're a monster, you really are. But that's actually useful, because you cannot survive the world without being a monster. People think, well, that's interesting. I kind of suspected that I was a monster, and everyone's always said that was bad. And it is bad, obviously, but there's something that can be done about it, and there's something that can be transmuted into something good without being inhibited. Yeah. So you're saying, to be good, I don't have to be a neutered tomcat. To be good, I can be a monster, but I can be like a civilized monster. It's like, yeah, that's what you should aim at. You should be unbelievably dangerous. The more dangerous you are, the better. And then you should control that.
Because that's your doctrine on what constitutes morality, right? It's contained capacity for malevolence.
For mayhem.
For mayhem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I learned this partly from Jung, but also partly from Nietzsche. And of course, Jung learned it partly from Nietzsche, because Nietzsche pointed out that most of what passes for morality is just obedient cowardice. Yeah. So I'm an obedient coward. Well, no one wants to think that. So they say, well, no, I'm not an obedient coward. I'm a good person because I don't break any rules. It's like, no, you're not. You're an obedient coward, and you're too afraid to break the rules. That doesn't make you good. It also accounts for why the dark hero, the anti-hero, is so popular in cinematic representations in particular, because people go and watch the mafia hitmen and guys like that, and they, there's a dark part of them that thinks, wow, those guys are really cool. Like movies like Quentin Tarantino's movies, where the hitmen are wisecracking and, they're tough and they can handle everything. And you think, well, these guys are psychopathic criminals. Why are people looking up to them? It's because, well, you're not moral if you're just harmless. And the question is, well, what's the antidote to being harmless? And the antidote to that is to open up that doorway into the shadow. And then you could become that, right? There's that gleeful, predatory victory that's part of that, and that would be associated with, let's say, the attitude that I could have had to what happened with Channel 4. It's like, I won. Yeah. Look the fuck out. Right. But no, that's not right, because it's not good enough. It's better than losing by a lot. Yeah. Because there's nothing in a loss that's admirable. But it's not the highest form of victory. And there's no reason not to go for the highest form of victory. And that's peace. Yeah. Right? It's not predatory victory. It's peace. Because anyone with any sense, who has any wisdom, regards peace as the goal. And that isn't the peace that means that I'm so afraid of you that I'm not going to say anything. It's the peace that is that, it's the peace of armed opponents who respect one another. Right, that's real peace.
Harking back to the hero's myth one more time, do you think that basically all people need need to complete this narrative at some stage in their lives? Do all people need
It is their lives. Like if you don't act this out, let's say, you're not living, you're fragmented. You're a puppet. You're a puppet of other motivational forces. Like this is what happens when you unite the motivational forces that guide you. Yeah. Unite your own nature with your own culture and rise up above it. That's what happens is you end up acting this out in one way or another. And you might as well know it. And this was Jung's point. It's like you can be the unconscious actor of a malevolent, tragic drama. Or you can wake the hell up and you can decide that you're going to be the hero of not only your story, but of everyone's story. And then you can choose. Which of those do you want? Now the problem with choosing, let's call it the archetypally heroic path, is that you have to take the responsibility. But the upside is, well, what the hell's the difference between responsibility and opportunity?
Yeah.
You could say, well, there's no difference between responsibility and opportunity, so the more responsibility you take, the more opportunity you have. Now maybe you don't want that because you'd rather cower in the corner and hide. But the thing is that you probably wouldn't rather do that, because if you try it, you'll find that there's nothing in it but self-contempt and misery. Right? That's a bad pathway to pull back and to fail to engage in the world, and you end up bitter and resentful and self-destructive and vengeful and then far worse. That's you can develop a liking for that. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah. No, I understand. I was summarizing the cinematic history of the past 15 years, and there were a few characters that I found particularly archetypical. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering, because I don't think you've ever mentioned these in your lectures. So there's Maximus from Gladiator. There's Hector of Troy, from Troy, who faces off against Achilles. There's King Leonidas from 300 with the Spartans. And there's Spartacus. And what stood out to me was these are all deeply archetypical figures. Mm-hmm. And they have a few core properties in common. One is they talk very little, and if they talk very decisive. Mm-hmm. Two is they never or seldom raise their voice. Mm-hmm. Only if they raise their voice, it's so the troops can hear them. And three, I think that within these archetypes might reside the case, maybe the ultimate case for male monogamy. Because these archetypes that resonate so strongly with men, what they all have in common is that they're fiercely loyal to one woman alone.
Right. Well, that's part of them. That's part of the incorporation of the shadow, I would say, because, Louis C.K. a while back talked about Tiger Woods, and I really liked it because people were complaining about Tiger Woods and his affairs,
yeah, and
also about Arnold Schwarzenegger and his affairs, and one of the things that Louis C.K. pointed out, quite in a very comical manner, was that, well, many men aren't having the affairs of Tiger Woods. But that's not because they're good men, it's because they don't have, I think he said, a busload of Swedish bikini models waiting for them at the final hole. So the idea would be that you should conduct yourself so that you are attractive to many women, maybe that you have your pick of them, but then you should pick one. And that's a sacrifice. Obviously, that's a sacrifice of a sort. It's a strange sacrifice because, I talked to someone, a comedian recently, who told me of one of his experiences in Las Vegas. So he went to Las Vegas with a sports superstar. And they went to a party, and what literally happened at the party was one woman brought forward a small group of other women, all very attractive, and basically told the sports legend that he could just pick one of them and she would go home with him, right? And so that had all been arranged beforehand, and he said that he's been in many situations where something like that has happened. And I thought, well, that sort of is appealing to the Hugh Hefner playboy 14-year-old fantasy that sort of gripped our culture from the 1960s onward. But imagine that you sleep casually with 100 women in a 6-month period, or a 3-month period for that matter, or a 3-week period. I don't care, pick your time frame. And you say, well, what and you're ecstatic with yourself because you've been validated by this opportunity. And I'm not making light of that. it's not nothing to be attractive to women like that. It's really something to be attractive to women like that. But it isn't obvious to me that your choice to conduct yourself in that manner enriches your life and the life of other people more in any way than picking one person and actually having a relationship with them. It's only true that that promiscuous pathway, let's say, is better if you can actually divorce sexuality from all the other elements of life. You say, well, it's about variety and it's about impulsive pleasure. Or maybe it could be even slightly deeper than merely impulsive pleasure. It could be shared impulsive pleasure. But I don't think you can do that because sexuality isn't divorceable from family and from morality and from all the other elements of your life. And if you're mature, you know that. And so you make a decision. You make a decision not to capitalize on your opportunity, not to misuse your opportunities. And you know, a huge part of the Me Too phenomena, a huge part of this battle that's being played out in our culture is a consequence of the failure of men to recognize that. Now, it's not only the failure of men, let me be absolutely clear about that, because, for example, with the example of the sports superstar, the women who are lining up in front of him, parading themselves and offering themselves, are deeply complicit in this pathological game. And so it's pretty clear anthropologically as well that, you know, sexual choice tends towards a Pareto distribution, especially for men. So most men have very little selection at their disposal, and a small number of men have excess opportunities. The question is, what should that small number of men do? And you might say, capitalize on it and to hell with the consequences. And like, it's a powerful argument, but I do believe it's wrong. It destabilizes the society. Yeah. And so, and I also don't think it does your soul any good, because the problem with treating other people as casual sexual partners, let's say, is that you also treat yourself that way simultaneously. And I don't think that that does you any good, because you're not, unless that's what you want to be. If you want to be a casual partner, it's like, well, that's, I wouldn't say that's a particularly noble ambition. You should be able to do better than that.
All right, so we just discussed the centrality in your philosophy of the archetypical hero's myth, which is basically one descends into the underworld, you go where you least want to look, you face the dragon goddess of chaos, you fight with all you have and a little more, and if you survive, you retrieve something of supreme value and you escort it back into the daylight.
Mm-hmm. And then you share it with everyone else.
And then you share it, yeah.
Which is a crucial part, crucial part of it.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely.